This is for the Texas Department of License and Regulation Combative Sports Advisory Board meeting. We'll do a roll call, and then at that point, we will see if we have the parties necessary to have a meeting, a quorum to have a meeting. So we'll start with the roll call. Dr. Wayne Lee, that's myself, present. Mike Bataa, absent. Dr. Emmanuel Gonzalez.
Present.
Carrie Hatley. Mike Menard. Mick Maynard. Chris Reed.
Here, sir.
Dr. Richard Schramm.
Present.
Mr. Blaine Sybil. And Dr. Randolph Taylor, absent. So based on the numbers, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 present, which don't meet the numbers for the quorum. But since we're here, what we will have is it official to call it a meeting?
No, sir.
You can't say meeting. What do you call it?
A gathering.
A gathering?
Yeah, I think that we will have some informal. I'm sorry. I think that at this point you can go to informal discussions.
Discussions.
You can take no action, no votes, and proceed as a meeting that is not an official meeting on the Open Meetings Act.
Okay. And based on the Open Meetings Act, can we still proceed with having the various groups present their data?
You can have a generalized discussion, yes, sir.
A generalized discussion, so.
Let me, because y'all are having this odd conversation. Mary Winston, TDLR, you can't vote on anything. Yes, the
Right.
staff can make their presentation, and I'm not as learned as our esteemed Assistant General Counsel here, so he's picking his words very carefully. You can't vote on anything. Yes, staff can make their presentations. If there's a work group discussion, you cannot vote. That is the difference.
No votes.
No
but
votes.
the discussion, they can present their data, and the data does go into the record.
Yes.
Okay. So we can proceed with having the data presented as we would normally do with the meeting, correct?
No motions, no votes.
No
Correct,
motions,
Paul?
no
Correct.
votes. Okay. So what do we call this? So we will proceed with a discussion with the Combative Sports and Advisory Board meeting for December 1st, 2017. We'll start. Can we still follow the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so following the agenda, we've done the call to order, we've done the roll call certification. We do not have a quorum, and based on that, we are having a discussion. So we will have, so we can't do approval of the minutes.
No, sir.
So we'll move to public. So can we do public comment?
You can, yes, sir.
So is anyone present for public comment today? No public comment, so we'll continue moving down the list. So that would go to staff reports. Number 1, Executive Office.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members, Nick Voinis, TDLR. Want to introduce to you our Deputy Executive Director, Carla James, who's here today as well. But want to thank you for being here and thank you for your service to Texas. Going to give you a little brief, kind of a little summary of what's going on around the agency. On a very sad note, we lost one of our leaders on October 31st as George Ferry passed away. He was our longtime compliance director since 1999, fought a brave fight with cancer, and we miss him dearly. Our thoughts and prayers go to his family. Since lawmakers have gone home, so to speak, from earlier this year, from the 85th legislative session and the special summer session, TDLR staff's been busy implementing legislation that was passed during that time. So all of our divisions have been involved in the process, which includes developing rules, communicating to stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards, hiring additional staff, and dealing with education exams, IT programs, and more. A majority of the work has been completed, but this process will continue as we will continue to implement programs into 2018 and 2019. As for new programs, to remind you, on May 29th, Governor Abbott signed House Bill 100 into law, which immediately brought oversight of the state's transportation network companies to TDLR. Those rules went into effect today, December 1. On September 1st, TDLR picked up the state's podiatrists, and on November 1, we added related programs from the Department of State Health Services, phase 2 of the 13 total programs that we were granted 2 years ago. So now we have code enforcement officers, laser hair removal, massage therapy, mold assessors and remediators, offender education programs, and sanitarians. Next September, we'll pick up the state's behavioral analyst. One also mentioned that as we add programs granted to us by the legislature, lawmakers have also deregulated 5 of our programs since 2003, and will deregulate 4 others in the next 2 years. We recommended that action after our strategic planning process, which included public and industry feedback. Now, the legislature agreed that the licensing requirement for those programs were unnecessary and burdensome, and doing without them posed little or no risk to consumer protection. I briefly mentioned our every other year strategic planning. We'll be going through that process again this upcoming spring of 2018. Last meeting, we talked a bit about our response plan and actions for Hurricane Harvey relief. This fall, TDLR staff worked hard to help our licensees and small businesses in the Gulf Coast area recover from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. And we coordinated with the governor's office and their Rebuild Texas efforts, and we're implementing procedures to assist all eligible licensees in those affected areas to help them recover, return to work as quickly as possible by removing the burden of red tape. Our Harvey focus now is on the rebuild by protecting small businesses and consumers, avoid unlicensed activity, and ensuring that they receive quality work for their hard-earned dollars. Information in all this can be found on our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and the Governor's Rebuild Texas site. Back to our website for a minute, I wanted to share with you some recent web traffic numbers associated with this program. Over the last 10 months, from January 1 to October 31st, your website had more than 51,000 page views. That's an average of 169 per day. And our web visitors definitely are on the go, as only 40% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop computer, while 56% did so from a smartphone and 4% from a tablet. The top reasons for visiting the Combative Sports website: number 1, results from previous events; number 2, applications and forms, followed by laws and rules, frequently asked questions, and Texas State boxing champions. Also wanted to add that we're always looking at improving our websites, working to make them more fresh, more informative. Another goal is to make them as user-friendly as we possibly can. Our sites are good, but like anything else, we would like to see them be better. So any input you have would be appreciated there. And web projects to promote our social media, Facebook accounts, if you'd like to keep up with TDLR news and events. That is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And from the Combative Sports side, we are very saddened also when the loss of Ms. Ferry was very instrumental with a lot of the fights that we've covered, and known him for a very long time, so he will be dearly missed. All right, so moving on to compliance. Greg?
Good morning, Board. Greg Oliver, Combative Sports Program Manager. Since our last report, we had a couple more events, a couple of other things have happened. One thing that's not on here I noticed was the amputee boxing. What's happening with the amputee boxing program is USA Boxing wants to take it over. So, but they've been talking to Mr. Shamus, who's the president of the organization, as far as how they can make it work with USA Boxing, because they think they could bring it nationwide, international-wide, USA Boxing to the Olympics. So we still might not get it, depends how we work out. Okay. Here's the event, program event stats and activities. The event stats from January this year. Amateur MMA, 33 events. Boxing, 42. Combination shows, 7. Professional MMA, 31. And Muay Thai, 0. Now, we really don't count a Muay Thai event because there's some MMA shows that are having Muay Thai with it, such like the combo would be under where we'll have, 8 MMA, 2 Muay Thai. So that would fall underneath. It's not just strictly a Muay Thai show. That's why it shows 0. It's tied in with the combo show. TV events from January till now, till November 30th, we've had 11. That's dropped, and the reason drop on that is when we had the PCB program, the Premier Boxing Championships, we're getting a lot of those event dates, and since that program has basically gone down to basically 5, 6 events a year, we lost most of them TV shows we're having. New promoters meetings from January up to November, we had 11 new promoters, professional promoters, no amateur associations. All the amateur associations we've had, they just renewed, so we still got the same amount of amateur associations. On amateur, I'll bring it a little bit more that's not on here. I think I need to add it. Next time, y'all have something so y'all can see. Is amateurs has really fallen down this year. Reason being is Texas, the insurance coverage for amateur MMA shows has almost doubled to tripled in some cases, depending on how many fights they got on their card. So where a lot of the amateur shows are getting is some of these professional promoters also have an amateur association. So they're tying in 4 amateur fights with their regular 6 pro fights. So they're having like a pro-am, but it's they have the amateur first and they have the pro. So that's how we're keeping the amateur program still getting built, because we're not having all these amateur associations, but it's real expensive to get that insurance, trying to make it a profitable business. Some can do it, but most of them can't. But just because the ones we've got, the both professional and amateur, they're able to sustain this program. The biggest thing we had this past quarter was the Ringstar sports promoter. They had this new tournament kick in, and there was weight classes. They had the 8 elite boxers. They competed in an elimination tournament over time, not an elimination where it's a 1-2 day event. It's over the whole year, course of the year, and it's in different sites. And we had our date here in Antonio, and they're all fighting to be, it's the light heavyweight division. I think Dr. Gonzalez were present there, and they saw high work and just a grand show, and hopefully next year when they go to the other weight classes, we could get at least a couple of them shows in too. Because the major United States networks are picking it up. The show we had here was picked up in Europe and Germany. And now they saw the response to what they're watching it. So now the U.S. TV market wants to get involved. So that's going to help our TV events there also. And then one of the things we had on our past advisory board was on Brett Knuckle, but James, my assistant here, he's going to have a little bit of stuff to speak on that also. Any questions?
Real quick, Chris Reed.
Yes, sir.
We think on the amateur promoters about not having as many now, but is there a big difference between if you know of between the insurance for the pro cards and the amateur cards? Is it cheaper on the pro cards?
No, it's the same price, except the pro promoter seems to get more sponsors as to the amateur
Gotcha.
does.
I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's more of a want to promote, sponsor a pro event as to an amateur event.
And our license fees and everything else is the same?
No, the registration for amateur association is $50, security bond. The pro, you have to have the gross receipts, general liability bond. As all our amateur associations, we don't have where A has rules, B don't have it. They all run off. They all copy each other. That way it's uniformed right across the board.
All right, any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you very much.
All right,
Brett.
thank you.
Thanks,
All right. Next, we'll have the Enforcement Division.
Dr. Lee, members of the board, good morning. My name is Michael Shirk. I'm one of the prosecutors who's just been assigned to take over Combative Sports. I have a few numbers and statistics. I think they probably have already been given to you in the material, so I'll run through them very quickly, and then if you have any questions that you're allowed to ask, I'll be happy to answer them, if I'm allowed to answer them. The summary, or a good encapsulation of the kind of cases we're seeing, is in my report. We still see a number of THC violations on the drug tests. What we have been doing is somewhat going back and assessing the propriety of sanctions. You know, a THC positive at 100 nanograms or less, we're going below the $500 that we're otherwise authorized to do. There's a feeling that at that level it may be hemp supplements or contact rather than intentional usage, but we still do find violations even at a low level of THC concentrate. So the penalties that you see in the case of Mr. Reyes and Mr. Rodriguez reflect the different concentrations. Mr. Reyes, which was a Class B, came in at 500, but he had 135 nanograms per milliliter. Mr. Rodriguez, the second case, per liter, and was dropped. The third case had to do with the failure to make a $3,000 deductible available. In that instance, unfortunately, what happened was the promoter lost their license, let it expire about a month after the bout, and so chasing them down for that money is impossible. We did get a default order and a significant sanction levied against them. I'm not sure at this point whether they've paid for the medical treatment as part of their deductible. The statistics that are there at the bottom of the page, what's interesting, I think, in all of our programs is to see whether or not staff is keeping up with the cases that come in. And here we have 109 cases opened, cases resolved is slightly higher, 111, which is always a good sign because it means we can get to cases more quickly. We don't have the old lingering cases. And from my experience, what is most effective from a prosecutorial enforcement standpoint is certainty of prosecution. But if we have to wait 3 months before we can get to a case, that certainty is diluted. With these kind of numbers, I'm confident that we're going to be able to get to cases quickly and really send a strong message that people will face prosecution if they violate our rules. The amount of penalties is relatively low compared to overall TDLR, 95,375, but that's just a function of how many cases come in. This is a low caseload program compared to the other ones, especially tow and vehicle storage facilities, which I work a lot on. Those are the materials in my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions if I've left any up here.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to working with the board.
Same here. Next is licensing. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. I'm Dee Dee McEachern. I'm the Director of Licensing here at TDLR. I don't have a lot of new information to share with you today because you just met fairly recently ago. I just wanted to talk about your numbers. In case in point, when we were talking about the amateur promoters, those numbers have gone up 2, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 15%. But like Greg said, you know, we know why that's happening primarily, but everything else has remained fairly consistent.
So overall, the numbers are the same with the decrease in the amateur.
Right, that's where your biggest is. You also have, there was one person who dropped out from being a event coordinator. We lost one. That went from 6 to 5. Other than that, everything else, the percentage-wise, has been negligible of change.
All right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Following the outline, we should be at letter F, which is recess and work group breakout sessions. So are we still following that? Or can we follow that at this point?
With one caveat. There's a concern that the members who are appointed to the work groups, some of those members may not be here. And so if you break into the work groups and there are different people in those work groups, we need to make sure that at the next meeting the members who are absent do not rejoin the work groups. Otherwise, you'll have a walking quorum, and that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
So then we can wait. So would it be okay to wait until the
Wait, you can do it today. You can members on the work group signed, and that would cause a problem. So we need to verify who's on the work groups and how would you reconfigure them if you need to.
I think we should wait.
Um,
I think we should wait. Yeah.
Okay.
The bottom line, Dr. Lee, is that it's your discretion. If you want to proceed with the work groups, I think you can.
Okay, well, based on discretion and more importantly, working with the group that's present, some of us overlap, but there are other members who are solely in different work groups. So I think that it would probably be in the best interest overall if we would just table that until the next meeting.
That's your call.
That's what I would like to do.
Yes, sir. What we'll do is schedule the work groups. We'll try again to schedule through a conference call.
Well,
I know.
okay, we can do a conference call, but I think that's fine. I don't know if we can, with the quorum, make a meeting date. Is that also correct? For the next meeting in order to discuss the time to get with the work groups?
I think we're talking two different issues. The next meeting will follow the normal course.
Okay,
If my suggestion would be that between now and the next meeting, so that we continue to have the discussion, that the work groups, we'll schedule conference calls for those work groups so that they can continue working before the next meeting.
okay. And we can do that.
Yes, sir.
Carl, is there any way that these gentlemen made the trip here, is there some way we could break out before, during, or after the meeting and do some work?
Certainly, but that's why I said it was Dr. Lee's discretion as to how to proceed. The work groups can go on today if you want, but that's your decision.
Jim, Manuel Gonzalez, I thought that those breakout, the telephone conference groups were pretty darn good. And I got a lot out of it, and at the same time, while we were discussing it, I had time to be in my laptop and research it while we're talking. I think we should do that, in my opinion, and so we can have a more solid, concise approach to this at the next meeting.
And the reason they were on the agenda for breakout sessions today was because we realized that there was a scheduling issue the last time we attempted to set those meetings, and we knew you'd be here today. And so that's why they were put on the agenda for today. But you don't have to do that if that's your decision to continue with the conference calls.
I think we need to continue conference calls. No, they are productive. And it allows fine-tune the things that we have to do in terms of the actual meeting, and that way there's less time, there's no waste.
And it's convenient.
And it's convenient because most of us are doing it from the office or we're doing it at the job site, and we're able to get the stuff together and we're talking back and forth, and then by the time we come to meeting, we have a summary of what was discussed, so it makes it more efficient.
And concise.
It was just brought to my attention that if you wanted to move forward with the work groups today, that Dr. Lee, Dr. Gonzalez, and Dr. Schramm are on the medical protocol work group, so you could have that meeting today. Dr. Taylor sent written information in, so you can review that. Then there are overlapping work groups, so that Dr. Lee, Dr. Taylor, Mr. Reed, and Dr. Bland are on the industry-related work groups. So those work groups can meet today if that's what you would like to do. I think the overlap would be Dr. Lee between the two work groups.
Yeah, from the overlap.
But again, it's a call that's discretionary on your part. And again, without voting, it would just be a generalized discussion.
I mean, I think, again, we didn't do the pre-call before, so then we didn't go over the issues. We're meeting today, and I think that although we're here and it's good to utilize the time, I think that the time would not be effectively used because we didn't do the before coming here to have substantive discussion.
Yes, sir. Understood.
So I would again pass, although we have the groups in place, we didn't do the adequate prep beforehand to have an adequate discussion that would be of any significant value. So I would again go on with the pass until the next meeting, and then that way we can be productive as we have been in the past.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that being said, do I continue on the listing on the schedule? Do I move to the next?
I believe that's the last substantive issue.
That's the last substantive issue?
Yes.
Yes, sir. The other things would require a vote.
And we can't vote.
If there are other issues you want to place on the agenda, you can have that discussion.
So we still can do that even without a quorum?
Yes, sir. Because it's just a request from each member to have a discussion in the future.
All right, so then what I'll do is I'll ask each member if they have any items they would like to add on the agenda for the next meeting. Does anyone have any items that they would like to have on the agenda added? Shram?
I was not present at the last meeting, and we had discussed a revision of the Combative Sports administrative rules regarding the responsibilities of the ringside position. Was that addressed at the last meeting?
I think it was. I think it's in the minutes.
How was it resolved?
I gotta read it again.
Was section 61.46, responsibility of ringside physicians, changed?
Well, in order for that to have been changed, it would have had to be reviewed to come up for a vote.
There have been no changes to the rules.
Okay. I'd like to bring that up for next meeting regarding the responsibilities of the physician
Okay, so can we have
in
that
the
added
administrative rules.
so that it can be discussed
Yes, sir.
and reviewed in the work group so that that way it can be presented again at the next meeting?
And just as a discussion, James, Mr. Erickson?
Yes, sir.
I viewed the videos in the email you sent on November 15th.
Regarding the weight cut?
Uh-huh. And I think you also mentioned specific gravity as a test and some other things. I just had some questions. How is California regulating weight cutting at this point?
Jim Erickson, TDLR, Combative Sports. Dr. Schramm, they have what they call a 10-point system that they put into effect. They did research. That was the pretty thick email that I sent you. It was several megs, and I have a hard copy with me if you'd like to look at it.
I went through it.
Whatever. Okay. They're going in, and they've attacked it through different methods. Number one, they license them somewhat according to their weight classes, not just saying you're a licensed fighter. They're saying you're a licensed MMA competitor at between 170 and 185 pounds. They determine that by a questionnaire at the license application, and they also have it certified by the doctor that gives the yearly exam. So they're saying, you know, on this form, doctor, do you think that this person can, be healthy enough to compete at this weight class? That's one step. Another step that they're talking about is attacking their purse. In MMA, you have two different purses. You have a show purse, let's say $10,000 to show up and fight, then you have a $10,000 win purse. Previously, they already had been fining overweight fighters 20% of their first purse. Now they've changed it to 20% of your win as well, so that they're fining them more money for missing weight.
Dr. Lee, if I might, Without going, I guess, into a point-by-point analysis of the articles before they've gone to the work groups, the intent was to get this in front of the work groups first before we have a generalized discussion. And so I think it'd be more appropriate to hold back on the details of what's in that California approach until we
Okay.
can
Fair
be more
enough.
concise in what we intend to do with it.
And so everyone in that particular work group has been issued.
Oh, yeah, a couple weeks ago. Yep.
All right.
No response, but it's been issued.
Is
Absolutely.
that fine?
No.
with you?
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Fair
you.
enough.
Any other questions for
It's a
it?
pretty healthy package.
It was a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of
Good.
pictures, though.
Well, I
There
did
was
have-
a lot of pictures, so.
I did have one other question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned fines, increasing fines, which actually sounds like it would motivate someone to cut weight even more to miss the fine. As far as regulating weight cut, do they have any numbers that they've set state to for cutoff as far as percentage of weight loss, and as far as weighing the fighter 30 days in advance, and
Yes.
then do they have some limits that they've set?
There's some in the information that they've set limits, and if you break those limits, they may not let you compete at that weight class again. The next time you come in, you're going to have to move up a weight class.
Have they increased the number of weight classifications in the
Yes,
state?
California has. Charles, do I continue? I don't.
Yeah, actually, I prefer
I'm
if we
pushing
could.
the envelope here.
Yeah,
I don't.
I think it'd be prudent to kind of trim the discussion to the very minimum, which I think we've crossed.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other items that need to be addressed?
I was, Manuel Gonzalez, I've been approached and called by several physicians. Maybe we can talk about increasing the doctor's pay. I have to review that. It's been there since I've been here, 20 years. It's been the same. And I've been getting calls from certain physicians. They're not very happy.
It'll be on the next agenda.
Greg?
Well, on paying the camp, it's said by the promoter, so all y'all gotta do, if y'all get the sign.
I'm sorry, but not to get into the substantive discussion before it goes to the work group, to get placed on the agenda without a resolution. This is just to identify which issues are going to go on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
And then Wayne Lee, the only other issue that I would like to add is, I think from legal, when he was talking about changing in terms of fines based on marijuana, I think we have to sit down and reassess what the states or what the laws show in terms of what the milligram is and what penalties are going to be, and whether or not we're going to have fines at all for marijuana testing.
Yeah, and I think this is a part of the work group that'll be discussing the drug testing and that whole set of issues related to drug testing. So, yeah, it'll be on the agenda, but I think it'll also be discussed by the work groups.
Okay.
There's one other issue related to insurance. Just from my own personal experience with malpractice, I recently checked my coverage with my carrier, and it's apparently regional, so that if I travel outside a particular region, I'm not covered, and I'm currently negotiating with the underwriter for a statewide coverage for my malpractice, and it's fairly specific. They want to know the percentage of time I might go to San Antonio, the percentage I go to Dallas, percentage I go to Houston, because the rates are different in the different cities even. So I think it might be a worthwhile discussion, at least to bring that up and see what other physicians' experiences have been or are regarding their coverage, and carriers and regional coverage, and those issues might be worthwhile to discuss.
We can place that on the agenda as a specific item, but also be aware that the malpractice insurance issues are assigned to a work group as well. So we can have your discussion within the context of the work group and then bring it
Absolutely.
back as an agenda item.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think at this point, with address the additional topics to be added to the work groups or to be discussed at the next meeting. Is it appropriate at this point to discuss date, or we're going to stay on the same timetable and come up with dates for the next meeting?
In that there's nothing pressing that I'm aware of before the board that has any time limits or deadlines set. I think there's flexibility in when you meet next, and I would assume that'll be sometime after the first of the year.
Yes.
But I would want to plan enough time for the work groups to actually meet, and there may be a need for more than one work group meeting to resolve issues or make recommendations. So you may want to take that into account when we decide to set the next meeting. And any suggestions will be just those suggestions, because there'll be no actual vote, but just a suggestion as when we meet next.
Well, I think with the end of the year and the first of the year coming up, I think that January would be a good time to have the work groups do discussions through the month of January, based on dates that are decided, and then picking on a date for sometime in February or maybe March for the group
Yes, sir.
for the committee to meet again.
And I think we'll explore with Mr. Fletcher the possibility of a meeting in March, and use the months in between to do the work groups.
Jim, will you contact us and set up a date?
Also, just March and February, we got a lot of events in February.
Okay.
And Mary Winston, you all have some intense work in the work groups. So as Charles was saying, it may require a couple of meetings. And with what Greg just said, March, and Tamala can take a look at the March dates for availability. And as always, she'll contact you for your availability so we can try to get a quorum here to discuss the work group findings.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything, and if there is nothing else from the committee, is it okay to close, or we just say the meeting?
No, sir. The meeting is done. There's nothing to close.
Okay.
You can hit the gavel if you want to, Dr. Lee.
It's taking it up.